There are moments in life when you realize all your sacrifices have led to something tangible, something real. That was exactly how I felt when I signed the final paperwork for the house. I wasn't just buying a building made of bricks and wood. I was securing my future, my reward for every sleepless night, every overtime shift, every moment I denied myself little luxuries so that one day I could afford something that was truly mine. It was a two-story house in a quiet, well-kept neighborhood. The kind of place where families put up Christmas lights in December, where kids rode their bikes in the evenings, and where people took pride in their lawns. The backyard was my favorite part, wide, open, full of possibilities. Maybe one day, I'd build a deck, host summer barbecues, or, if life went well, watch my kids play out there while Sophia and I sipped coffee on a Sunday morning. Sophia. She had been with me for 5 years of marriage, and before that, 2 years of dating. I loved her, or at least, I had convinced myself that I did. Love, after all, wasn't just about feelings. It was about commitment, about pushing forward even when things got rough. And things had gotten rough. I ignored the signs back then. The way her parents treated me like their personal ATM. The way she never hesitated to remind me of what she deserved. The way her affection always seemed to increase whenever I did something for her. Maybe I should have noticed it earlier. Maybe I should have realized that love, real love, wasn't supposed to feel like a transaction. But I was too deep in it, too focused on the future I wanted to build. So, when the day finally came to bring Sophia to the house for the first time, I was nervous. Excited, yes, but nervous. I wanted her to love it as much as I did. I wanted her to see it as the home we would build our future in. I remember standing outside with the keys in my hand, turning to look at her, expecting a reaction. She barely even glanced at the house before turning to me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Not excitement, not gratitude, just entitlement. She took the keys from my hand, jingling them in her palm like she had just been given a new toy. "My parents will live here too," she said, so casually, so effortlessly, as if she had already made up her mind long before I had even handed her the keys. At first, I thought I misheard her. "What?" I asked, forcing out a small, confused laugh. Sophia shrugged, stepping toward the door like the place already belonged to her. "My parents. They'll move in with us. There's plenty of space, so it shouldn't be a problem." I stared at her, waiting for her to smile, to let me know it was a joke, that she was just testing my reaction. It never came. "Sophia," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "This is our house. Just us." She turned to me then, her face tightening, her lips pressing into a thin line. "That's selfish," she said, as if I had just suggested throwing them into the streets. I blinked, trying to process what was happening. "Sophia, I worked my ass off for this house. I spent years saving. This was for us. For our future." She didn't look impressed. In fact, she looked annoyed. "If you don't like it," she said, voice sharp and dismissive, "you can leave." The words hit me harder than I expected, not just because of what she said, but because of how she said it. There was no hesitation, no concern, no fear that she might lose me over this. She meant it. For the first time in our marriage, I felt something shift inside me. A realization that maybe, just maybe, I had been looking at things through the wrong lens all along. I thought this house was the start of a new chapter, a fresh beginning for us. But standing there, staring at my wife, the woman I had fought so hard to provide for, I realized something chilling. Maybe this wasn't a beginning at all. Maybe this was the end. When I married Sophia, I thought I knew what I was getting into. We had been together long enough for me to see her flaws, her stubbornness, her sharp tongue, her unwillingness to compromise. But love, I told myself, was about accepting the good with the bad. And in the beginning, there was a lot of good. We laughed. We traveled. We built a life together. But then came the cracks, small at first, like tiny fractures in glass. Sophia's family was the first sign. Her parents, Margaret and Henry, had always been involved in our lives, but I never saw it as a problem. In fact, I wanted to believe it was a good thing, a sign that they cared about their daughter, about us. But over time, I began to realize that their involvement wasn't out of love. It was out of convenience. They saw me as an opportunity, a walking wallet they could tap into whenever life got a little too uncomfortable for them. It started with small loans. Margaret would call Sophia, her voice dripping with concern. "Sweetheart, your father and I are struggling this month. If you could send a little something, we'd be so grateful. And Sophia? She never even hesitated. She would transfer the money without so much as a conversation with me, as if our finances were hers alone to control. At first, I didn't mind. I was raised to take care of family, to support the people I loved. And besides, it wasn't every month, just the occasional request when things got tight for them. But then, the requests became more frequent. A sudden medical bill, a rent increase, Henry's business venture that somehow never got off the ground. Every single time, Sophia sent them money. And every single time, I told myself it was fine. Until one day, I checked our joint account and saw a huge withdrawal. $5,000, gone overnight. I remember staring at the screen, my stomach twisting. It wasn't a number we could just shrug off. When I asked Sophia about it, she barely even looked up from her phone. I sent it to my parents, she said, like it was nothing. They needed it. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice even. Sophia, you didn't think to talk to me about this first? She frowned, finally glancing up. Why would I? It's not like we're struggling. That was the moment I realized we had different definitions of marriage. To me, marriage was about partnership, about making decisions together, about working as a team. To Sophia, marriage meant I provided, and she decided. That night, we argued for the first time in a long while. I told her I wasn't okay with the way she handled money, that she couldn't just make these choices without consulting me. She called me selfish. I called her irresponsible. We went to bed angry. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. And that was Sophia's way. When something didn't go her way, she ignored it, pretended it didn't exist. But I couldn't ignore it. I started watching her more closely, paying attention to the way she spoke about her family's problems. She saw their struggles as her own burden to carry. But the truth? They weren't struggling at all. Margaret and Henry weren't sick. They weren't jobless. They weren't in any real financial distress. They were just lazy. Henry was perfectly capable of working, but he didn't want to. He'd rather sit at home, complaining about how the world was unfair, how he was too old to start over. Margaret, meanwhile, had perfected the art of guilt tripping. She knew exactly what to say to make Sophia feel like she owed them, like she was a bad daughter if she didn't give. And Sophia? She fell for it. Every single time. It got worse after I bought the house. Suddenly, their expectations skyrocketed. Margaret made offhand comments about how big the house was, how it would be a waste for just the two of us. Henry started talking about retirement, how it would be nice to finally relax without worrying about rent. The hints were obvious, but I never imagined Sophia would take their side over mine. And yet, here we were, standing outside the house I had poured my blood, sweat, and years into, listening to my wife tell me that if I didn't like her parents moving in, I could leave. Her words played in my head over and over. If you don't like it, you can leave. I didn't respond that night. I didn't argue. I just stood there. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized that all these years, I had been the only one fighting for our marriage. I had been the one compromising, the one sacrificing, the one bending over backwards to keep us together. And for what? For a woman who saw me as nothing more than a provider? For a marriage where my opinions didn't even matter? No, I wasn't going to let this slide. For years, I had done everything right. I had worked hard. I had stayed faithful. I had given everything I had. But enough was enough. This house, my house, was supposed to be a symbol of my success. A place where I could finally breathe, where I could finally start the next chapter of my life in peace. And now, it felt like a prison before I had even spent a single night in it. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to let Sophia think she had won. And then, I was going to take it all away. I spent the next few days in silence. Not because I was unsure of what to do, but because I wanted Sophia to believe I had accepted her decision. I let her move around the house, making plans, acting as if she had just been crowned queen of a new kingdom. She barely acknowledged my presence, barely noticed the shift in me. And that was her mistake. I had spent years working for this house, years sacrificing, saving, pushing myself beyond exhaustion, only to have it handed over to people who had never lifted a finger for me. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. But I didn't react. I didn't argue. I simply watched. And as I watched, I planned. Because if Sophia believed this house was hers, I was going to teach her a lesson she would never forget. The arrival of the leeches. Sophia didn't waste any time. By the weekend, her parents were standing at my doorstep, suitcases in hand. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't hesitate. Margaret swept inside first, her eyes scanning every inch of the house like she was evaluating a property she intended to flip. Henry followed, moving slower, but with the same air of entitlement. He barely even greeted me. Instead, he walked through my home with his hands in his pockets, inspecting it like he was the landlord. Sophia was beaming. It was like she had just accomplished something great, like she had done me a favor by expanding our family. And then came the worst part. Margaret turned to me and sighed. This house has potential, but I think we'll need to make some changes. Changes? Henry nodded in agreement. Yeah, the walls are a little dull. And the furniture? We'll need to upgrade. I blinked. I waited for Sophia to say something, to remind them that this was my house. She didn't. She just smiled and said, "We can talk about renovations later, Mom. Let's get you settled first." Settled. As if they were moving in permanently. As if I didn't exist. As if this house had never belonged to me at all. I clenched my jaw so tightly I thought my teeth would crack. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't going to give Sophia a chance to fix this. She had made her choice. Now, I was going to make mine. The silent execution of my plan. Over the next few days, I started my work. Sophia was so busy playing the devoted daughter that she didn't even notice when I began making phone calls. She didn't notice when I reached out to my realtor. She didn't notice when I gathered every document, every financial record, every legal paper that ensured my complete ownership of the house. Because that was the thing, Sophia's name wasn't on anything. She had assumed that because we were married, she automatically had a claim to it. She was wrong. Dead wrong. I took my time. I made sure the sale was completely locked in before making my move. And when everything was finalized, I packed my bags, walked to the front door, and called for Sophia. She came downstairs, looking slightly annoyed. "What?" I held up my suitcase. "I'm leaving." That got her attention. Her eyebrows pulled together, her lips forming a frown. "Leaving? Where are you going?" I exhaled slowly, letting the silence stretch out between us before I finally said, "I sold the house." The world stopped. Sophia froze, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. And then, pure, unfiltered rage. "You what?" I let the words sink in. I wanted her to feel it, to truly understand what I had done. "I sold the house. It's not ours anymore. The new owner takes possession in 3 days." Sophia let out a sharp, breathless laugh, like she thought I was joking. "You can't do that." I smiled. "I already did." Her eyes darted around, as if expecting to see some kind of proof that I was lying. But then she saw the empty closet upstairs, the missing suitcases, the cleared-out drawers. And it hit her. I wasn't bluffing. "Where the hell are we supposed to go?" she snapped, her voice rising in panic. I shrugged. "I don't know, Sophia. Maybe you should ask your parents." And then I walked out the door. I had left the house in the dead of night, my bags packed, my decision final. By the time the sun rose, I was long gone. I didn't leave a note. I didn't offer an explanation beyond what I had already said. I simply walked away. It was liberating. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of Sophia's entitlement, her parents' greed, their endless demands. I wasn't a provider anymore. I was a man reclaiming his life. The first call. My phone buzzed just as I was sipping my morning coffee in my new apartment, a place I had secured before making my exit. It was Sophia. I let it ring. Then came a text. "Where are you? Call me back now." I took another sip of coffee, staring at the screen, watching as more messages flooded in. Then, finally, I picked up. "Where the hell are you?" she screeched the moment the call connected. "The house is empty." I leaned back, completely calm. "Yeah, I sold it, remember?" Dead silence. For a moment, I thought she had hung up, but then I heard her ragged breathing. You can't do this," she whispered. "Tell me this is a joke." I smiled. "You told me I could leave if I didn't like it. So I left. But where am I supposed to go? What about my parents?" Now, that was the part that made me laugh. "Sophia, do you hear yourself? Do you even realize what you're saying? You made your choice. You wanted your parents to live in that house. You wanted them to rule over it. Well, guess what? The house is gone. You played the game, and you lost." The meltdown. I could hear panic in her voice now, and it only fueled my satisfaction. "You're so selfish," she screamed. "You ruined everything. My parents have nowhere to go." "Not my problem," I said coolly. How could you do this to me? She cried. I let out a slow breath. You did this to yourself, Sophia. And with that, I ended the call. I sat there for a long time, phone in hand, heart pounding in my chest. For years, I had been the quiet, accommodating husband, the man who worked himself to the bone, who sacrificed everything just to keep her happy. But now, I was finally free. The second call. I knew that Sophia wouldn't stop at one call. I expected her to try again, to scream, to demand answers. But what I didn't expect was the next call to come from Margaret. It was barely an hour later when my phone rang again, her name flashing across the screen. I stared at it for a moment before answering. Hello, Margaret. She didn't even wait. You disgusting, heartless man, she spat, her voice shrill. You've left my daughter homeless. I chuckled. I left my daughter homeless? That's interesting. Last I checked, you were the ones who demanded to move in. What happened, Margaret? Did your plan fall apart? You're a terrible husband. My daughter deserves better than this. I laughed. You're right. She deserves someone who will let her walk all over them. I suggest you find her a new fool. You think you've won? She sneered. You'll regret this. Mark my words. I smirked. Oh, I doubt that. Then I hung up. Sophia's desperation. Over the next few days, the calls didn't stop. Sophia went through every stage of denial. Stage 1, rage. She screamed, cursed, blamed me for destroying our marriage. Stage 2, desperation. She started begging. We can fix this. I didn't mean what I said. I love you, please come home. Stage 3, guilt tripping. You promised to always be there for me. I thought you were a good man. How can you sleep at night knowing what you did to me? At every stage, I ignored her. She had made her choice. Now, she could live with it. The unexpected visit. I should have known she wouldn't stop at calls. It was a Friday evening when I heard a knock at my door. I knew who it was before I even checked. I opened the door to find Sophia, Margaret, and Henry standing outside. Margaret looked like she was ready for war. Henry looked furious. Sophia? Sophia looked broken. For the first time, there was genuine fear in her eyes. We need to talk, she said softly. I crossed my arms. Talk. Now you want to talk. Margaret scoffed. You ungrateful bastard. You ruined our lives. I almost laughed. Oh, you mean the life I built? The house I paid for? The one you tried to steal? Sophia took a deep breath. I made a mistake. I see that now. Please, just come back. For a brief moment, I saw it. The regret. The realization. The truth sinking in. She had never expected me to stand up for myself. She had thought I would always be there, always willing to clean up the mess she made. But it was too late. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, I don't owe you anything. Margaret gasped as if I had just slapped her. You selfish man. My daughter deserves better. I smirked. I agree. She deserves someone just as entitled as she is. Maybe you can find a man who'll let you live in his house for free. With that, I stepped inside, and I slammed the door shut. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in years. No angry wife stomping around the house. No in-laws treating me like their personal bank. No suffocating presence demanding more from me than I was willing to give. Just silence. Peace. Freedom. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe. I took my time getting ready, making myself a full breakfast, something I hadn't done in years. Back when I lived with Sophia, I was always rushing, always working, always doing something to keep our life moving forward. Now I had all the time in the world. I turned my phone over, noticing the missed calls and unread messages. Sophia hadn't stopped trying to reach me. Margaret and Henry had both sent texts as well, angry, desperate, demanding. I smirked. They were spiraling. And I was thriving. The beginning of her fall. I didn't have to wonder how Sophia was doing. People talk. Mutual friends, co-workers, old acquaintances. I heard everything. The story of the man who sold his house and left his wife and in-laws homeless had spread like wildfire. And Sophia? She was paying the price. She and her parents had to move back into their tiny apartment, the same one they used to complain about. Margaret was livid, blaming Sophia for losing their golden ticket. Henry, who had gotten used to the idea of a comfortable retirement, was forced to look for a job at 62. They had thought they had it all figured out. They had assumed I would just give in, just roll over and accept their rule. I didn't mean it when I said you could leave. I was just upset. I wasn't thinking. We can fix this. Please, just come back home. Home? What home? I sold it. She didn't have a home anymore. I read each message, taking my time, feeling a satisfaction I couldn't quite describe. For years, she had made me feel like I was the one who needed her. She had controlled the narrative, had manipulated situations to make me feel guilty, obligated, responsible. But now she was the one begging. And I was done. Mutual friends started to see the truth. People started reaching out to me. Some were shocked by what I had done. Others understood. Bro, I never liked the way Sophia treated you, one friend admitted. She was always acting like you owed her something. You did the right thing, man, another said. I would have snapped a long time ago. Even some of the people who had originally taken Sophia's side were starting to realize the truth. She had pushed me too far. She had made me choose between myself and her family. And she had lost. Sophia's reputation takes a hit. It wasn't just in our circle that Sophia was struggling. She tried dating again. But the problem? No man wanted to take on a woman with freeloading parents. Her past relationships were messy. Her reputation as an entitled, manipulative wife had spread. And worst of all, she had nothing to offer. Her biggest selling point had been the life I provided. Now, she had no house, no security, no status. And men noticed. The same guys who used to flirt with her, the same ones who had once envied me for scoring such a woman, they wanted nothing to do with her now. Because without me, Sophia was just another woman with baggage. And the world? The world wasn't as kind as I had been. The final attempt. One evening, as I was getting home from work, I saw someone standing outside my building. It was Sophia. She looked different. Not physically. She was still beautiful, still the woman I had once loved. But something in her eyes had changed. She looked lost. Hollow. For the first time in years, I didn't see arrogance or entitlement. I saw defeat. I didn't invite her in. I didn't ask what she was doing there. I simply crossed my arms and said, "What do you want, Sophia?" She swallowed hard. I just wanted to see you." I didn't respond. She hesitated, then said, "I miss you." There it was. The final card. The last desperate attempt to pull me back in. And for a brief moment, I felt something. Not love, not regret, but pity. She had been so sure of herself, so convinced that she could do whatever she wanted, say whatever she wanted, and that I would always be there to pick up the pieces. Now she stood in front of me, a woman who had lost everything. And the saddest part? She still didn't fully understand why. I took a deep breath. "Go home, Sophia," I said quietly. She blinked. "But I don't." I cut her off. "Exactly. Goodbye." Then I turned, walked inside, and closed the door behind me. And just like that, it was over. I sat in my living room that night, staring at the door long after Sophia had left. She had come looking for answers, for closure, for something, anything, that would make her feel like she still had a place in my life. But I had nothing left to give her. No sympathy, no second chances, no more pieces of myself to sacrifice for someone who had only ever taken. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even relieved. I was just done. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a peace that was unfamiliar but welcomed. Sophia's last stand. I thought that was the end of it. I thought Sophia would finally accept that her choices had led her here. But I should have known better. The next morning, I woke up to a series of messages from unknown numbers. Numbers I didn't recognize. "How could you do this to Sophia? You're a monster. You abandoned your wife." It didn't take me long to figure out what had happened. Sophia had started a campaign. She had gone to friends, acquaintances, anyone who would listen, spinning a sob story about how I had betrayed her, left her with nothing, thrown her out like trash. I could picture it in my head. Her crocodile tears, her voice trembling as she exaggerated every little detail, making herself the victim. And the worst part? Some people believed her. Not everyone, but enough. Enough for my phone to keep lighting up with texts and calls from people who had never cared about our marriage before. And now, suddenly, they all had an opinion. I ignored most of them, but one message caught my attention. It was from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. "I just thought you should know. Sophia told people you cheated on her." I froze. Cheated? I had spent years being faithful, being the perfect husband, giving everything I had. And now, she was trying to rewrite the story? I laughed. A bitter, exhausted laugh. This was Sophia's last desperate move. If she couldn't make me come back, she would try to destroy me. The confrontation. I wasn't going to sit back and let her drag my name through the mud. I dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. Oh, so now you want to talk? She sneered. Cut the crap, Sophia, I said, my voice colder than I expected. I know what you're doing. Silence. Then, she scoffed. I don't know what you're talking about. I clenched my jaw. Lying about me? Saying I cheated? That's low, even for you. She exhaled sharply, like she had been caught, but didn't want to admit it. People will believe what they want to believe. No, Sophia. You made them believe it. You spread the lie. She didn't deny it. Of course, she didn't. Because to her, this wasn't about truth. It wasn't even about love. It was about control. She had lost control over me, so she was trying to control the narrative instead. You ruined my life first, she said suddenly, her voice shaking. You embarrassed me. You took everything away from me. You made me look weak. Oh, there it was. It wasn't about what I had done. It was about how I had made her look. She didn't care that she had hurt me. She didn't care that she had taken me for granted. She only cared that I had finally stood up for myself. I shook my head, letting out a slow breath. Sophia, this is the last time we're ever going to speak. Her breath hitched. What? You want to play the victim? Go ahead. You want to tell lies? Fine. I don't care anymore. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. But you and I both know the truth. Silence. I almost thought she had hung up. Then, a choked sob. I hate you, she whispered. I really, really hate you. And this time, she ended the call first. I stared at the phone for a long time. And then, I deleted her number. The aftermath. The text slowed down after that. People moved on, as they always do. Those who truly knew me didn't believe her lies. Those who did were never really my friends to begin with. And Sophia? She disappeared. I stopped hearing about her. No more calls. No more messages. No more desperate attempts to drag me back. For the first time in years, she was completely out of my life. And I felt lighter than I ever had before. A lesson learned. There's a strange thing that happens after you go through something like this. You start looking at the world differently. At yourself differently. I had spent so many years trying to be a good husband, a good provider, a good man. I had sacrificed, compromised, given my all. And in the end, it hadn't been enough. Because some people will always take. No matter how much you give. No matter how much you love them. And sometimes, the only way to win is to walk away. The final goodbye. Months passed. I moved on. I built a life that was truly mine. And then, one evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, I saw it. A notification. A friend request. From Sophia. I stared at it for a long time. Then, without a second thought, I blocked her. Because some doors? They are meant to stay closed. I had finally found peace. It wasn't immediate, and it hadn't come easily. After everything, after Sophia's desperate attempts to drag me back, after the smear campaign, after the phone calls and the messages, I had finally broken free. The house was gone. The marriage was over. The chaos had settled. Or so I thought. The knock on my door. It was a Saturday afternoon. I had spent the morning doing things that used to feel foreign to me. Things I never had time for when I was constantly working to support someone who only ever took. I had cooked breakfast in my own kitchen, taken a walk in my neighborhood, stopped by a bookstore just because I felt like it. Simple things. Things I had never realized I missed. And just as I was about to settle down with a book, there was a knock at my door. At first, I thought it was a delivery. But then came another knock. Louder. More impatient. Something in my gut twisted. I wasn't expecting anyone. I set the book down and walked toward the door, peeking through the peephole. And my stomach dropped. Sophia. And she wasn't alone. Margaret was standing beside her, arms crossed, face twisted into a deep scowl. And behind them, Henry. I took a slow, deep breath. What the hell were they doing here? Facing the parasites again. I didn't want to open the door. I should have ignored it, let them stand there until they got tired and left. But something in me needed to see it. Needed to look them in the eyes and watch them realize that they had no power over me anymore. So, I unlocked the door and pulled it open. I didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, arms crossed, staring at the three people who had once made my life a living hell. Sophia looked different. Her usual arrogance was gone. Instead, there was something desperate about her. Margaret, on the other hand, still carried herself with that same superior attitude, as if she still thought she had any control over the situation. Henry just looked tired. I let the silence stretch between us. Finally, Sophia spoke. We need to talk. I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my expression blank. I don't see why. Margaret scoffed. Don't be a child. This is serious. I chuckled under my breath. Oh, I'm sure it is. But whatever it is, it's not my problem. Sophia swallowed hard, stepping forward. Please. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my jaw. Fine. You have 5 minutes. Talk. The desperate plea. Sophia hesitated, like she wasn't sure where to start. Then, finally, I need your help. I stared at her. Then I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. You need my help? I repeated. You mean the man you told to leave? The man you tried to ruin? The man you lied about? That guy. Sophia flinched, but nodded. Margaret huffed. Don't be petty. A real man helps his family. I tilted my head. Oh, so now we're family? That's funny. Because the last time I checked, I wasn't part of your family. I was just your paycheck. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Henry cleared his throat, stepping forward. We lost the apartment. That got my attention. I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. Sophia shifted uncomfortably. We lost the apartment. We fell behind on rent, and they evicted us. I let the words sink in. Then, slowly, I smiled. Let me get this straight, I said, voice calm. After everything you did, after you tried to take my house, after you told me I could leave, after you spread lies about me, now you're standing here, asking me for help because you lost your apartment? Sophia looked away. Margaret scoffed. Don't act like you're better than us. I laughed again. Oh, Margaret, I don't have to act. I am better than you. Their last attempt to guilt me. Sophia stepped forward, voice softer. Please, I know I messed up. I know I took you for granted. But we have nowhere to go. We just need a place to stay. Just until we figure things out. I took a deep breath, shaking my head. No. Margaret gasped. No. No, I repeated. You are not stepping foot into my home. Not now. Not ever. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Margaret turned red with anger. How dare you? After everything my daughter did for you. I cut her off with a sharp laugh. Everything she did for me? Are you serious? Margaret, your daughter drained me dry. She treated me like a wallet, not a husband. And you? You fed into it. You encouraged it. And now? Now you want my help. Sophia wiped at her eyes. I don't have anyone else to turn to. I stared at her for a long moment. Then, finally, I said the words I had been waiting to say for years. That's not my problem. I stepped back inside and slammed the door in their faces. The freedom of saying no. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting. For them to knock again. For them to shout through the door. For Sophia to beg. But after a moment, I heard it. Their footsteps. Walking away. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I never thought I would. Closure. I had given them years of my life. I had bent over backwards, sacrificed everything, ignored the red flags, tolerated the abuse. But now they were gone. And I was finally, truly, unapologetically free. The moment I shut the door in their faces, I knew that I was never going to see them again. Not as my problem, not as my responsibility, not as people who had any power over me. I stood there for a while, just breathing. A deep, slow inhale. A steady exhale. I hadn't realized how much tension I had been carrying until now. For years, I had been chained to Sophia and her family, trapped in a cycle of giving, providing, sacrificing, while they just took. And now, the chains were broken. I turned around, walked back into my apartment, and sat down on the couch. Silence. Peace. Freedom. I had no idea how long I just sat there, staring at nothing, listening to the quiet. No more Sophia. No more Margaret. No more Henry. Just me. And for the first time in a long time, I liked the sound of that. The final message. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. No tension. No anxiety. No weight on my shoulders. I stretched, made a full breakfast, and actually enjoyed it. No rushed bites. No worrying about the next expense. No stress about what Sophia would demand next. As I was sipping my coffee, my phone buzzed. One last message. From Sophia. I stared at it for a moment, debating whether to even open it. Then, with a sigh, I tapped on it. I understand now. I see what I did. I see how I took you for granted. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I read it twice, then a third time, and after a long moment, I simply deleted it. No response. No final words. No more energy wasted on someone who didn't deserve it. She had finally understood, but it was too late. She wasn't my problem anymore. walking into a new life. It was strange, waking up every day without the usual stress. For years, I had been constantly worried about money, about keeping up with Sophia's expectations, about pleasing a woman who was never satisfied. Now I had no one to please but myself. I started focusing on me. I went to the gym more. I read books I had put off for years. I traveled, small trips at first, then bigger ones. And most importantly, I learned to enjoy my own company again. No one demanding things from me. No one draining me. No one expecting me to be their provider while offering nothing in return. Just me. And it was enough. The rumors and the reality. Of course, there were still whispers. Some people still believed Sophia's version of the story. That I was the villain. That I had abandoned her. That I was selfish. But I didn't care. Because the people who truly mattered, they knew the truth. They saw how much I had given, how much I had tolerated, how much I had sacrificed, and how little I had gotten in return. And even if they didn't, even if the whole world thought I was the bad guy, it wouldn't have mattered. Because for the first time in years, I was happy. And that was something no one could take away from me. The last time I saw her. Months passed. Seasons changed. And one day, completely by accident, I saw her again. I was out at a cafe, enjoying a quiet afternoon, when I looked up, and there she was. Sophia. She hadn't seen me yet. She was sitting alone, staring at her phone, looking different. The arrogance was gone. The confidence had faded. She looked smaller. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. And then, as if sensing my gaze, she looked up. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she gave me a small, hesitant smile. A silent question. Would I come over? Would I say something? Would I give her one last chance? I didn't. Instead, I simply gave her a nod. Not out of kindness. Not out of regret. Just acknowledgement. Then I turned around and walked away. Because some doors? They're meant to stay closed. Months passed. Life moved forward. For me, it was a fresh start. A life where I woke up every morning with a sense of peace, without the weight of an ungrateful wife and her freeloading parents draining me dry. But for Sophia, life had taken a very different turn, and I heard all about it. The stories start coming in. At first, I had no interest in what happened to her. I had closed that chapter, locked the door, and thrown away the key. But life has a funny way of making sure you hear about the people who wronged you. I started getting updates from mutual friends, old acquaintances, people who still ran in the same circles as Sophia. And what I heard, it was brutal. Apparently, things had spiraled for her after our last encounter. She couldn't find another place to live after losing the apartment. Margaret and Henry blamed her for everything, constantly reminding her that she was the reason they had lost their cushy lifestyle. The men she tried dating weren't interested in a woman carrying that much baggage. And the worst part? She wasn't the desirable catch she thought she was anymore. The harsh reality hits. See, Sophia had always believed that if things went south with me, she could easily move on to another man. Someone richer, someone who would worship her the way she felt she deserved. But reality? Reality was much colder than she had expected. The men who used to flirt with her when she was married to me, the ones who used to admire her from a distance, they vanished. Because without the house, without the comfortable life I had provided, she was just another woman with nothing to offer. She tried dating again. She went on a few dates, but the men quickly lost interest. Some saw how entitled she was and ran for the hills. Others realized she was bringing along 2 dependent parents and cut ties immediately. One man literally laughed when she suggested that he let her parents move in with him. And as time passed, her reputation only got worse. The same people who once envied her now pitted her. Because now, instead of being the wife of a successful man, she was just a bitter, struggling woman with no direction. And that was her worst nightmare. Margaret and Henry turned against her. I wasn't surprised when I heard that Margaret and Henry had finally turned on her. After all, these were people who had never taken responsibility for anything in their lives. They had used me as long as they could. And when I was gone, they turned to Sophia, expecting her to provide. But Sophia? She had nothing. No job. No money. No more connections to wealthy, successful men. And the public humiliation. The final nail in the coffin came when Sophia got into a public argument with her mother. It happened at a grocery store, right in the middle of the frozen foods aisle. A former mutual friend happened to be there and later sent me a message about it. Apparently, Margaret had snapped. You had it all. she shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. A house. A man who paid for everything. And you threw it away because of your pride. Sophia had tears in her eyes, trying to whisper back, trying to get her mother to lower her voice. But Margaret? Margaret didn't care. She went on and on about how Sophia had destroyed their lives, about how she had let the best thing that ever happened to her slip away. People stared. Some whispered. And Sophia? She looked humiliated. Because finally, she had to face the truth. She had ruined herself. And there was no one left to blame. My reaction, when I first heard about this, I wasn't sure how I felt. There was a part of me that thought I might feel pity for her. That maybe, after everything, I would have some lingering sympathy for the woman I had once loved. But as I sat there, reading the message, imagining her standing in the middle of that grocery store, listening to her mother tear into her in front of strangers, I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anything. I had moved on. And she was finally drowning in the consequences of her own actions. Karma had done what I never could. And honestly, it was more satisfying than I ever expected. The final realization. As the weeks passed, I heard less and less about Sophia. People lost interest in her story. She was no longer important. And that was the worst punishment of all. Because for someone like Sophia, someone who thrived on attention, validation, and power, being forgotten was worse than any revenge I could have planned. She had spent years believing she was special, that she deserved to have the world handed to her. And now she was just another cautionary tale. A warning to others about what happens when you take the wrong people for granted. And me? I was free. Truly, completely free. And I was never looking back. The first time I truly felt free was on a random Wednesday morning. There was no grand event, no fireworks, no moment of dramatic realization. I simply woke up, stretched, walked to my kitchen, and made a cup of coffee. And as I stood there, staring out of my window at the sunrise, I realized I wasn't waiting for the next problem. For years, my life had been a cycle of stress and sacrifice. Waking up every day with a mental checklist of what Sophia wanted, what her parents needed, what I had to do to keep everyone else happy, while I was left with nothing. But now, there was no one to drain me. No one expecting me to solve their problems. No one demanding more than I could give. No one guilt-tripping me into feeling like I was never enough. For the first time in my life, I belonged to myself. And that was the greatest feeling in the world. Rebuilding myself. Freedom wasn't just about being alone. It was about learning how to live again. I had spent so many years surviving that I had forgotten how to enjoy life. So, I made a list. A simple one. Things I had put off. Things I had always wanted to do. And one by one, I started crossing them off. I took a solo trip. Nothing fancy, just a weekend away to clear my head. I started going to the gym regularly, not just to stay fit, but because it made me feel strong again. I reconnected with old friends, people I had neglected because Sophia had always made me feel like she should be my only priority. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned, reading, hiking, even learning how to cook properly. Bit by bit, I started becoming the man I was always meant to be. And the best part? I wasn't doing it for anyone else. Not for Sophia. Not for society's expectations. Not for some imaginary version of myself that had to constantly prove his worth. I was doing it for me. The last echo of Sophia. One evening, months after my final encounter with Sophia, I received a message. A simple one. From an unknown number. I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a long moment. Not because I was angry. Not because I was tempted to respond. But because it reminded me of how different we were. She still saw happiness as something she needed to get from someone else. A man. A provider. A source of validation. But me? I had learned the truth. Happiness is something you build for yourself. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the message. Because some ghosts aren't worth resurrecting. A future that belongs to me. I don't know what happened to Sophia after that. And honestly, I don't care. She was a lesson. A chapter in my life that had served its purpose. And now, I was writing a new one. A better one. One where I wasn't just someone's provider. One where I wasn't just existing to serve others. One where I mattered. As I sat on my porch that evening, sipping my drink and watching the sunset, I smiled. Sophia thought she could control me. She thought I was weak. But in the end, I walked away with my dignity, my peace, and my freedom. And her? She lost everything.